29 people with us, and we'll start live streaming as soon as the clock strikes 5. I'm in New Jersey, by the way, as you can see behind me. That's downtown Trenton. Oh, there's Hetty. Hi, Hetty. How you doing? Steve, let me know when we're live. Are we recording, Steve?
Yep.
All right, it's 5 o'clock Eastern time. Hello, everybody. This is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman, back with the 129th, count them, 129, Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition call. We have 27 people with us, which is the amount of money that was the average donation to Bernie's campaign is $27. So it's a good, important number. We have a really packed show as always today. We're going to start in the first hour with election issues, democracy issues, as we usually do. We're going to briefly mention the Wisconsin Supreme Court race, the guilty pleas in Ohio on the Larry Householder bribery case, which set the price for the Ohio. It's good we have a firm price for what it costs to buy or rent a legislature. The price in Ohio turns out to be $61 million, and the perps have been found guilty. We'll get to that in a minute. We have Frank Knapp with us from Business for Democracy, a very interesting group, and then we're going to go to Maya Van Rosten from, is Maya with us, Wendy? Do we see Maya yet? Not yet, okay. She's from the Green Referenda group. We're going to talk a bit about fascism in Florida, or DeFascism in Florida. And then we're going to also, there's a breaking story this week, was really interesting. A former FBI agent has come forward out of guilt, apparently, and is discussing that the American India movement was infiltrated by the FBI in the Cointelpro operation, with which I'm very familiar, having been in a group that was also infiltrated. And the purpose of the FBI infiltration of AIM was to, quote, get them to shoot each other. That's what the FBI was trying to do in the American Indian movement, was to get the people in the AIM to shoot each other. And then the second hour, we're going to do, as we always do, environmental issues. We're going to start with the discussion of Fukushima. We're going to talk about the horrors of the spill in Ohio, and we're also going to talk about the cliff that Joe Biden has just walked over, approving the drilling in the Arctic. It's outrageous and really a defining moment for Joe Biden, which not in a good way, in any way, shape, or form. So that'll be our 2 hours. We're going to go beyond. We are hosted by Wendy Lederman, Myla Reeson, Steve Caruso, and Mike Hirsch. And we also joined by the great Dick Christ. Dick, good to see you. Dick is the co-publisher with Sharon Kyle of the very powerful and important LAProgressive.com, which are really great to have them with us. I want to again mention the loss of our great friend and cohort, Jerry Manperl, somebody who's completely irreplaceable in our hearts and in our work. And Jerry, we miss you, brother. And you got the link, Jerry, if you want to tune in from the great beyond. We'd be glad to have you with us. So let's move ahead now. I do want to mention very quickly the Wisconsin Supreme Court race, which we've discussed in detail on these calls. The Center for Common Ground is doing postcards. I did get an email from the great Andrea Miller, who leads the Center for Common Ground. They are looking still for people to sign postcards and to send postcards into Wisconsin to let people know and to encourage them to come out and vote in this all-important Supreme Court race, state Supreme Court in Wisconsin. And I will say, in keeping with the tradition of total irrelevance of the Democratic Party, I've received this week two emails soliciting funds for the re-election of the Democratic senator of Wisconsin, which is all perfectly fine, except that race is in the fall of 2024. And here we are in the spring of 23. The Supreme Court race is April 4th in Wisconsin, and they're not raising money for that. They're raising money for a race a year and a half away. And, you know, we'll see. The Democrats probably won't give significant funding or organizational strength to this incredibly important, a very partisan Democratic race, Democratic and Republican versus Republican race for the Supreme Court in Wisconsin. So thank you, Democratic Party, once again for wasting our time and money. And we are nonpartisan here. We slam both parties. And in this case, once again, the Democratic Party is blowing it and diverting our attention and our money away from the Supreme Court race, April 4th, towards a race that is next year. It's unreal. So people who are interested, committed to wanting to get involved with the Democratic and versus Republican Supreme Court race in Wisconsin, please contact the Center for Common Ground. I think it's .org. Center for Common Ground. They need volunteers, and they are also nonpartisan to get out the vote in the Wisconsin Supreme Court race. So please do that. It will be very important. I also want to, you know, you got to celebrate sometimes. And as Steve Caruso can tell us there in Ohio, there has been a court case, a jury trial in Cincinnati of Larry Householder and another guy, I can't remember who it is, Steve, maybe you remember, for, you know, you can't make this stuff up.
Borges.
What's that?
Borges.
Yeah, Borges is the guy's name, for taking $61 million, count them, $61 million to flip the Ohio legislature to give a $1 billion bailout to the Davis, Bessie, and Perry nuclear plants, the mistakes by the lake, and they've been found guilty, and they're facing long prison terms. So I don't want to celebrate anybody going to prison, but I will celebrate this this verdict, which very clearly nails the Speaker of the Ohio House for taking $61 million from the utility, which has been named and renamed and now bought. I'm not even going to try to explain who the owners of these two nuclear plants on Lake Erie are. But these guys bribe them. There he is, Larry Householder. As you can see, he's begun to adjust to wearing orange with the hat anyway. And he looks like he lost some weight, but he'll certainly lose more weight as he goes off to prison. And there you go, found guilty, facing up to 20 years. So there may be some justice in America. We'll see what happens on the appeal, but there we go. So we're joined by Maya Van Rossumore and also Carolina from Florida. We're going to get to you next, Maya, after we talk with Frank Knapp. Frank, you are the founder and leader of Businesses for Democracy.
So, thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you for letting me be on. And I've enjoyed your conversation so far.
Okay, go ahead. So, Frank, tell us what you're about. Give you 10 minutes here, and then we'll go to Maya Van Rossumore. But tell us, Frank, what's your group about?
So, I've been a part of the American Sustainable Business Network for over 10 years. I served on this board. One of the planks of the American Sustainable Business Network is democracy. In March of last year, I became the director of their national campaign, Business for Democracy, and we established 8 small business collaboratives, Business for Democracy collaboratives in 8 states. And our purpose was to raise the voice of small business to say how important it is to maintain a strong democracy, because without a strong democracy, you're not going to have a vibrant entrepreneurial economy. So that's what we were working on in 2022, and we had some success of raising the voice. And now in 2023, we're looking at what we can do, in that we're not going to have a Congress that's going to pass any voting rights anytime soon. So we're really going to start focusing on what the states can do to prop up their democracy. And we're looking strongly at working with groups like Rank the Vote and Fair Vote in getting a business angle at advocating for ranked choice voting. And hopefully some of you all know what that is. So that's what this is all about. This is all about businesses need to be a participant in supporting democracy. That's what we're doing with our Business for Democracy campaign, a campaign of the American Sustainable Business Network. And I've been fortunate enough to direct it and look forward to doing more in 2023 and 2024.
So you know that for a business to advocate democracy in Florida, you could get arrested.
Well, you know, and that's the problem. I mean, we have example of what an autocracy is. We don't have to look at Russia or to Hungary to see what an autocracy is about. It's about one party rule, strong man rule. And when you get in a situation like we have in Florida, where we have an autocrat as the governor, a fascist, and we have a lapdog legislature that does whatever he wants them to do, he does whatever he wants to do and calls it the law. And that is not good for anybody, and it's not good for business. Business it needs to have a voice in policy that's being developed, and there is no voice of business developing policy in Florida. It's all what's coming out of Governor DeSantis's mouth.
Well, fantastic. So how long is your organization? Will you post your links in the chat, please? So that everybody knows how to get a hold of you.
Yeah,
And,
you had it on the screen a little while ago. Thank
yeah,
you.
but it needs to go in the chat so people can download the link. We have 51 people with us, and it's really great to hear about this. And where are you based?
Well, I'm in Columbia, South Carolina. I also happen to be the CEO and co-founder of the South Carolina Small Business Chamber of Commerce. I co-founded that back in the year 2000. So we've been around for 23 years. We're the black sheep of the chamber family because we typically come down to the side of progressive issues.
That's amazing. That's really interesting. And what kind of businesses are involved with your organization?
Well, ours in South Carolina, we have, we're all over the place. And the same with American Sustainable Business Network. They've been around since 2009. There are businesses that believe in democracy. They believe in having an inclusive economy. They believe in protecting the environment. They're there. It's just the public has been fooled into thinking that all businesses, all they want to do is reap profit and screw everybody. That's not who belongs to our organizations.
That'd be a great bumper sticker. Reap profit and screw everybody. That's the American way. Really good. John Steiner, you're involved with a lot of progressive businesses. You might want to meet this guy, Frank Knapp, and be in touch with him, especially for the thresholders and the progressive business organizations. I don't know if you know John Steiner, Frank, but
I don't know, but I'd love you to contact me, John.
So yeah, please get in touch with
Frank.
John.
I work real closely with Richard Idlen and Business for America.
Yeah,
I'm on their advisory board, and do put your email address in the chat.
I will do that right now. Yes.
And I've known David Levine for a long time.
Yeah, those were the two of the co-founders of the American Sustainable Business Council way back in 2009.
Well, bless all you're doing, particularly in a southern state.
Well, it's hard. It's hard.
Challenging, at least.
Absolutely. So I'll put my email in the chat for you.
Thanks.
Yeah, we know
Thanks,
that.
Harvey.
Yeah, good connection. We know that since Florida has since taken the mantle, but South Carolina has historically been the most right-wing state in the country. You were the first to secede from the Union, so I guess everybody goes to Fort Sumter and celebrates whatever. But anyway, Frank, it's great to have you on with us. Anything else you want to say to our group of great activists?
Well, if you're going to come down to South Carolina, celebrate the Confederacy or the war between the states, as they call it, and you want to go to Fort Sumter, you better get here quick before sea level rise takes away Fort Sumter.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's great to have you on, Frank. Wendy, very good. Thank you for getting Frank into the call. We really appreciate that. And Frank, keep coming back with us. We appreciate your presence and the work you do.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I thank you for showing me the new coast of New Jersey. Appreciate it.
Well, also, so I want to comment on the weather here. We see Paul Newman, who is in Los Angeles, sitting in his house in a winter coat. It's what, in the 40s or 50s in LA. And when it's in the 40s, I know this sounds wimpy, but when it's in the 40s in LA, it is really cold. And none of the houses have heat. So, Paul, our condolences to you. I escaped to a summery, sultry New Jersey, where I'm talking to you for now, where it's about the same temperature right now in New Jersey as it is in LA, but at least we have heat in the house. So at any rate, that was great, Frank. Really great to connect with you. Now I want to get Wendy. Do you want to introduce Maya to our group? We're joined, by the way, by the great Dennis Bernstein from the Flashpoint show in Berkeley and San Francisco Bay. Dennis, great to have you with us. And Maya, Wendy, do you want to tell us about Maya, please?
Sure, thank you. And sorry, some noise just started right outside here. It's so great to have Maya. It's such an awesome honor to have her. Yes, this is her amazing book, Green Amendments for the Generations. And it's the one word I think of when I think of Maya, besides friendly and just wonderful energy, is just revolutionary. What she's doing is just incredible. We've been speaking recently about citizens initiatives and ballot amendments and the power that they have. And Maya is an expert in this. She's had some amazing victories that you could read. I highly recommend everyone read this book, really. All of her different victories on the ways that citizens can take back the power from legislatures that have just gone rogue. And she's a member of the Delaware River Keepers and of the Delaware River Basin. She's an attorney and this amazing author, and I'm just going to pass it off to her now. And everyone just pay much attention and get her book. I can't recommend it enough.
Maya, it's great to see you. Where are you, Maya?
I am physically standing in Pennsylvania right now and blushing because Wendy, who's such an awesome advocate and has just recently shared with me some really valuable tools that we've put on our Green Amendment for the Generations website, to have her introduce me that way just makes me blush. And I should leave before I undermine your perception of me.
Well, listen, Wendy, put the link to your organization in the chat. And tell us what you do, please.
So there's I wear two hats. For the last 30 years, I've had the honor of serving as the Delaware Riverkeeper and leader of a 4-state organization called the Delaware Riverkeeper Network that engages in advocacy and litigation to fight the good fight for the beautiful Delaware River. But through the course of that 30 years of advocacy and activism, I, like so many people in the environmental arena, have experienced not just how our environmental protection laws across our nation fundamentally fail us, but how they actually betray us and really sell out our communities to feed dirty fossil fuel industries and industrial operations and developers, and help them, like the previous business operator said, help bad business actors reap profits at the expense of the people. And during the course of my work, I and my organization achieved a really amazing victory where we were able to defeat a very pro-fracking industry piece of legislation passed by the Pennsylvania legislature and signed by the Pennsylvania governor back in 2012. It was a really devastating law that we had to defeat, but because it had come through the democratic system, right, and been passed by the legislature and signed by the governor, what are your options to challenge it? Protests and things were not going to save the day for us. We needed a legal challenge. And we recognized that in the Bill of Rights section of the Pennsylvania Constitution, there was this long ignored right of the people to pure water, clean air, and a healthy environment. And we grabbed hold of that constitutional environmental rights amendment, what I now call a Green Amendment, and challenged that pro-fracking law. And in December of 2013, we defeated that law because it was determined that it would violate the Environmental Rights Amendment, the Green Amendment of the Pennsylvania Constitution. If we didn't have that amendment, that law would still be standing today in its entirety. In the wake of that victory, I assessed the Pennsylvania Constitutional Environmental Rights Amendment and to determine what was unique about it. Why were we able to achieve this powerful victory? And I sort of made a list, and I looked at every constitution across the nation and found that there was only one other constitution, one other state, Montana, at the time, who lifted up environmental rights to this same highest constitutional level. And I decided that I was going to change that, and I was going to try to inspire and help communities across the nation seek and secure constitutional green amendments of this caliber that would literally protect the environmental rights of the people of the state in the same most powerful way that we protect other fundamental rights like free speech and freedom of religion. And so for the last number of years, in addition to being the Delaware Riverkeeper, I have been leading the National Green Amendments for the Generations movement to try to accomplish this goal. We have a Green Amendment proposal advancing in the state of Florida. It's called the Florida Right to Clean Water. If you don't know about it, you better. There's also, you mentioned, Harvey, that you were in New Jersey. There's a Green Amendment proposal in New Jersey. We secured one in the state of New York just last year. And there are about 10 other states where Green Amendment proposals have been put forth and are advancing at this time. So that's what my book, The Green Amendment, is about. That's what Green Amendments for the Generations is all about. And that's what I have the honor of working on in addition to being the Delaware Riverkeeper.
So let me ask you, what are the tangible legal ramifications of having a Green Amendment on the books? What does it get you?
Yeah, what it gets you? Well, first off, what I do say to people is just think how powerfully our rights to free speech and freedom of religion, how powerfully gun rights are protected because they're given highest constitutional recognition and protection in our state and federal laws. All the same kinds of powerful protections you get for those other fundamental rights, you now get for the right to a clean, safe, and healthy environment. So if your government officials pass a law, pass a regulation, issue a permit, take an action that will violate, rise to that highest constitutional level and violate the rights of the people to a clean, safe, and healthy environment as articulated in the Bill of Rights section of their Constitution through their Green Amendment, then that government action can now be challenged on constitutional grounds, right? Like right now, as long as your industrial operators or developers are undertaking their pollution spewing, environmentally degrading activities in a way that complies with the law, they're golden, right? Because it's all very legal. But we all know that as our laws are written and implemented, there's tremendous sacrifice of our communities, right? People are drinking poisoned water and breathing toxic air and forced to live next to highly contaminated sites that are literally devastating their lives, but it's all perfectly legal. If you have a constitutional right to a clean water, clean air, a stable climate, healthy environments, now even that very legal activity, if it violates your human right to a clean, safe, and healthy environment, you have the opportunity to do something about it through advocacy or litigation. If there's a gap in the law, like when it comes to PFAS, where there is no law that is regulating the use of a contaminant, and as a result, it's proliferating into the environment in devastating ways. If you have a constitutional right to clean water, for example, then you can turn to your right to clean water in order to seek and secure government action that fills that gap, because you have a right. So even if there isn't legislation on the books, there's something now that you can do about it. When our Green Amendment language, right, is placed in the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution, particularly when we explicitly mandate the protection of the environmental rights of future generations, and mandate that the rights of all people be protected equitably, regardless of race, ethnicity, tribal membership status, gender, geography, or generation, which is what Green Amendments do. You now have constitutional grounding to secure true environmental justice and generational protection in a meaningful, enforceable, constitutional way. So there are all kinds of hypotheticals, and people ask me about them all the time, and we can go through them. But that's the long and the short of it. Your government has to behave in a way that protects your environmental rights and fulfills their constitutional obligation to protect natural resources for present and future generations. And when they don't, people can turn to the Constitution to try to get a remedy.
Can you put the wording of the amendment into the chat here so people can?
I really can't, because every state is unique and different. And
Okay.
so Green Amendment language has to fulfill key criteria. Like, it has to be in the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution. It has to be what we call in the law self-executing, meaning it's enforceable in its own right. It's not that you have a right to clean water as defined by the legislators. No, it's you have a right to clean water, and therefore it's enforceable on its own right. So there are those kinds of key criteria. It has to apply to all levels of government. It can't just hand power to the legislature, for example. So when those key criteria are fulfilled and you lift up environmental rights to that highest constitutional standing, then you have a Green Amendment. And what I do is, because every state is unique and different in a lot of different ways, one of the first things I do is I work with the community or with the legislators to identify the best language that fulfills, the unique personalities and organizations of that state. As long as they fulfill the key criteria, I'm all in. But we do have to make sure the constitutional language is language embraced by the people of that state, because they're the ones who have to get behind it in order to ultimately secure it.
Amazing, fantastic. Mary, and then John Steiner. Mary Butler Stonewall, and then John Steiner. Mary, are you unmuted? John, are you unmuted?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, John.
I have fallen in environmental love with you.
Are you married? Well, John, you're married. Come on.
I'm married. But just, I want to make sure that this is an appropriate new category for falling in love.
Oh, I appreciate that, John.
Harvey and Maya, would this be a way to shut down nuclear power plants?
Maya, what do you think?
Yeah. So, it really depends on, what your argument is. You're not going to come in and pass a Green Amendment and then, writ large, suddenly all the things that we don't like go away. Even in Pennsylvania, when we breathed legal life into Pennsylvania's Green Amendment, we didn't instantly get rid of fracking, right? It still happens in the state, and we're still having to work using our Green Amendment to hold that industry accountable, because the industry was there before we had a living, breathing, thriving Green Amendment, right? So now we're sort of having to claw back the ground. So when it comes to any industry, we have to look at the particular situation, and we have to find the government action that we're challenging. If it's an existing nuclear power plant and there's a new permit that's been issued or some sort of approval that's allowing that nuclear power plant to operate in ways that where we can make an argument that it's rising to the level of a constitutional violation, then we can challenge that government action or activity that's allowing that particular facility to perpetuate in a way that's having these devastating consequences. On the other hand, it's going to be really different if we're talking about, like they're talking about Harvey in New Jersey on the banks of the Delaware River, talking about a new power plant, perhaps located in the floodplain, right along the banks of a river, where storm surge will come in and could put that nuclear power plant 7 feet underwater, right? If there was a Green Amendment in that state, you can imagine, see, those are some of the facts in case you're wondering. If there was a Green Amendment in existence in that state, then we would be arguing to use that amendment, right, against the approval of such a devastating project in such a devastating place using such devastating operations. So it all depends on what we're talking about and where we're talking about it and what would be the ramifications on how the Green Amendment could or would or may not, help us.
Maya, two other quick questions. Are you
Yeah.
working at all with the folks at Represent.us? Do you know them?
No, I don't know them, but I would like to know them if they would
Okay.
like to get involved in the movement.
Well, they do statewide initiative and referendum more on the rounds of structural democracy. But it would be great. Take a look. It's represent.us. You'll get a sense of what they're up to. And Wendy and I would be happy to make that introduction. And then lastly, do you have a team of lawyers you're working with around the country on this? How much is you and how much is part of a collaboration?
Yeah. So everything's a collaboration, but it's a collaboration with the people in the state. And, it's quite interesting to me, even constitutional lawyers, for the most part, don't really understand how a Green Amendment works. So I'm always very deeply in the mix. But it depends on the leadership in the state. For example, in Florida, we have this amazing group of attorneys that really get it, as well as activists, right? And volunteer leaders that really get it. And so I sort of pop in, as needed. Whereas in New Mexico and Nevada and New Jersey, I'm very, very involved on literally a daily, a weekly basis. I will tell you, one of my biggest problems right now, as powerful as this idea is, as transformational as it is, believe it or not, I cannot get the foundations to fund it. So I would love to have a team of lawyers working with me, and activists and environmental justice leaders, but instead I have a very small group that, where it really is me sort of going in. But in every state, again, it's about supporting and building up the leadership and the collaboration in that state. So in Florida, there is this amazing collaboration of leaders and volunteers and lawyers, that have really grabbed the reins and are very powerfully advancing this idea through initiative. Again, it's the Florida Right to Clean Water, for those who haven't heard about it. Whereas in other states, the leadership is sometimes it's smaller, sometimes it's bigger, sometimes it's more individuals, sometimes it's more organizations, sometimes it's more the progressive legislators. Every state, again, has its own personality.
Sure.
So I really try to work with the communities in that state to help them get what they need to make this happen.
And are you working in Colorado?
So interestingly enough, there has been expressions of interest. I won't go work in a state unless I'm invited in. I consider myself like a vampire, right? Like you have to invite me in the door and then I'll come work with you wholeheartedly, although not suck your blood. But I do have to be invited in because, again, I'm not going to make this happen in Colorado. The people of Colorado are going to make it happen. So we've had expressions of interest from Colorado. I've been there a number of times to speak with organizations and individuals, but there has yet to be an individual or a group that steps up and says, hey, Maya, really want to partner up to make this happen here. So as of yet, just interest in Colorado, but not an active movement.
And do you work at all with state attorney generals to help make this happen?
I definitely would love to work with state attorneys general. The unfortunate thing is most of them oppose the Green Amendment, interestingly enough. Just this week, last couple of weeks, I've been working to really help the New Mexico Attorney General understand how beneficial the amendment will be and sort of get him to actually change his stance of opposition on the amendment, which we are doing. But look at Hawaii, you can look at a number of states where attorneys general officially go on the record. And it is quite surprising that they don't see this as the same powerful value added that the Pennsylvania Attorney General, now Governor Josh Shapiro, actually experienced. He would constantly refer to the Pennsylvania Green Amendment when bringing enforcement actions. And Mike Hirsch, your question about can we do this at the municipal level? By definition, no, because the municipality can't, pass a constitutional amendment. Although, if you get the state constitutional amendment, it will apply at the municipal level. And of course, a municipality can try to implement this concept within their own boundaries. But again, by definition, what they would be doing would be different.
Sure.
Let me-
Maya,
let me,
would you put your email in chat? I'd love to follow up with you both on Colorado and with fundraising.
Well, I gotta slightly contradict you there, Maya. I lived in a town and we were trying to stop a McDonald's. And we didn't have a constitution in Bexley. We had a charter, and we passed a charter amendment banning drive-through restaurants. And we defeated the McDonald's that way. So you can get charter amendments.
You can, absolutely. You can get powerful protection at the municipal level. But
Right.
I'm just saying, by definition, you can't get a constitutional green amendment because a municipality can't amend its constitution. But you're right,
No, you can, though.
municipalities no, you can't, because that has to be done through the constitutional amendment process, which is a statewide effort. But you can get powerful protections that would apply within that municipality. On the other hand, the risk, the additional challenge that you face is there is preemption by the state legislature, not for everything, but for lots of things or for most things. And so if you do it at the municipal level, you do it by charter, actually, you could find yourself at odds with the state. Whereas if it's in the state constitution and you ground your charter initiative in your state constitutional obligation to protect environmental rights and natural resources, you are in a dramatically stronger place should you find yourself at odds with the state legislature on what you're trying to accomplish.
Well, let's just say I hope you come into Ohio and do it there. But in the meantime,
There's been interest in Ohio, no movement yet, but there has been, like Colorado, some interest, but no action. But like I said, if you go to the Green Amendment website, we just in the last 2 weeks, a proposal in Texas, a proposal in Nevada, and a proposal in Tennessee.
all right, well, you need to come to California as well.
And
Very good.
California, no interest, but no action yet.
All right. Mary, and then Baba and Justin. Mary Stonewall, please. Are you unmuted? Baba, are you unmuted? I think they're both muted, and Justin also.
All right, here I am.
All right, go ahead. Will you unmute Baba and Justin as well? Go ahead, Mary, real quickly, please.
With our one gal talking about Constitution and green deals and all that, ma'am, I've been working in building code reform for sustainability since I was 5 years old, and I am 57 years old. And I want you to look at something that you haven't looked at yet when you're talking about constitutional, how the Constitution plays into the green and building for sustainability. The Declaration of Independence, that first sentence, your inherent right, some of which are life, land, property, prosperity. Those right there is an implied EPA code because of Dow Chemical or mono poisons air, water, and land that you live on as an infringement on your inherent natural rights as a U.S. citizen to life and prosperity.
Okay.
So I would love you to check out some of my stuff on that. And then when
okay.
you
Mary,
guys really need to understand that everything, the last three subjects that we've had when we talked about Fukushima and building code reform and sustainable and building green, I am your guru, and you guys haven't tapped into me yet. I have 52 years in this.
Okay, Mary.
And you haven't had me on as a speaker yet.
Send your stuff to Amaya, be in touch with her. And you are.
I already did. I already sent it to her private message.
Okay, thank you so much, Mary. We appreciate it. Baba and then Justin. Baba Akili.
Yes, my name's Akili, and I am a project coordinator with Corporate Accountability, and we've been working with the Mississippi Rapid Response Coalition, and these approaches sound like useful tactics that can be used. The other thing that I'm the national field coordinator with Black Lives Matter's Grassroots and a candidate for the California State Assembly. And so what you are proposing in terms of practical applications on how to move the green, how to advance the green movement is tremendously helpful and has been just educational in the few minutes that I've been on. But I want to circle back. How could resist, Mississippi is just, the state is resisting doing anything to really support the people in Jackson around their water issue. How have you all, and it's a super red state, so how have you all been able to move the issues in these red states? And as a candidate, one of the things that I would like to talk about is a green approach, a statewide green approach, because I think it would be a fight in the assembly. So anyway, if you would give me information about that, and how do you all work in these red states to advance a water green initiative or a green water initiative?
So
Great,
thanks
thank
for
you.
that great question. And I think that, a couple of answers. First off, different states have different approaches for constitutional amendment. Most of them, you can do it legislatively. So the legislature passes an amendment proposal once or twice, and then it goes to the people and you bypass the governor, right? And so some of it, depends on the dynamics of the state. There are also a number of states, and Wendy has provided this really great tool to me, and it's on the forthegenerations.org resources page. You'll find it, where she's identified all of, her and her team have identified all of the states where you could advance a constitutional amendment by ballot initiative, which is the way it is happening in the state of Florida, right? Where it's about getting the number of signatures to support it, and you go through the process a little bit differently. So part of what we assess from the get-go when I go and work with the community is which is the approach that we want to take, legislative or, people power, right? Through a people's initiative. And then we start to work that angle, always, of course, being flexible for adjustment if that becomes appropriate or value added. That's sort of number one. Number two, I always try to stress that whatever our green amendment strategies are, they have to be value added to the kind of battles that you talked about, Baba, things that are already happening in a state. We don't want to take power away or energy away from the battles that are happening right now that will be benefited by a green amendment when it's passed. But of course, we have to get it passed. So we always try to work on changing the language and blending our green amendment movement in a way that helps lift up and strengthen the battles that are already happening. So we have sort of synergistic value added. Fundraising, I always try, when I talk with a funder, to say, you need to help support the people on the ground and their current battles, as well as adding a green amendment to what they're already doing. That's sort of a second tenet of how I do it. A third is the leadership must be diverse in every category: race, gender, age, geography, right? So we have multiple voices, and we're always building leadership voices regardless of political affiliation. It's really about their perspective on the ground, right? So by having this diverse array of voices, we sort of always have somebody who's able to talk with everybody in that decision-making placement, whether it's a legislator or somebody who's trying to decide individually how they're going to vote on a ballot if they have a green amendment proposal before them. And then the fourth thing is really just to make clear, this is not a partisan issue, right? No matter how conservative you are, you need clean water and clean air that's toxic, cancer chemical free in order to have a healthy life, right? So we really do try to make clear this is about all people and helping all of us live healthy, happy lives, and trying to make sure that the conservative farmer understands what they get out of this in the same way that somebody who lives in an urban community understands it. Understanding There are some audiences we will never reach. I am never going to reach the, the fracking industry board member. So I'm not going to bother to try to reach them until they suffer some unfortunate personal circumstance that suddenly makes them open up their ears and care. On the other hand, we do really, I've been amazed how many people one would presume would be opposed to this, because in every other facet of their life, they're very conservative thinking. But yet when it comes to just understanding this basic fundamental, we all need clean, healthy water coming out of our faucet. They get it and they care, and they will be supportive of this movement where they're not supportive of other environmental movements.
Yes.
So I try not to have any preconceived notions.
I'm just checking
And I
on
do
you.
understand that
Are
it's
you okay?
not a value to waste my time with people who don't want to listen, but I never presume they don't want to listen, because it's quite amazing how many people really do. And they really care about their families and their communities. If we just give them a chance to have a conversation with us.
Beautiful. Thank you. Akili, very quickly, you said you're running for assembly in California. Where are you? Where's your district?
I'm in
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in Los Angeles, and I've been involved in social justice, racial justice, and economic justice advocacy for the past 50 years. I've worked with the farm workers. I'm lucky to start this project with Dolores Huerta on my side. And like I said, I'm currently the national field coordinator for Black Lives Matter and on the leadership team of Black Lives Matters LA. But so I would certainly like to have details about either an initiative or legislation. And one of the things I've observed is that sometimes if you propose that, a statewide initiative, it can help the legislative process, because they're willing. The legislators would rather do it themselves than have the people do it.
Great.
100%, Bubba. And that's why like I said, I would, whether it's Mississippi or California, I would love to come in and talk with you and say, like, who are the right people we need to bring into the room to figure out what's the right language for this state and what's the right strategy. And we would work that out together. Like, I wouldn't presume to know. You'll definitely know better. And that's why I would ask you. And so I'd love to come, with your team that you're working with at Black Lives Matter or in either of the states. I would love to sit down and have a conversation with you about that state and about this concept and how it might be helpful to the challenges that you're facing.
Wonderful. And Akili, we need your help to shut the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant. That's the #1 environmental issue in everybody's mind in California right now. Mala, you're raising your hand real quick.
Yeah, thank you. I just another follow-up with Baba and following on what you said. Baba, have you taken a public position about the shutdown of the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant? As you may know, most of the Democrats in the Assembly and the Senate voted to extend the life of Diablo. And I'm just wondering, what's the number? You're in LA, but what's the Assembly district number?
It's Assembly District 57. And because my history goes back to when Tom Hayden was in the California State Assembly and the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant was an issue then, I have been supporting the people in the area and opposed to the continuation of the Diablo Canyon for most of my political activism. So, and that goes back to my work with Tom Hayden and others. So, and I'm surprised that over the years we have not been able to finally shut it down. So that would be something that I would be certainly supportive of and want to work. One of the things that has to happen is we would have to circle back and begin to educate people about why that needs to happen, because it's been a long time now that has, it's kind of fallen off the front page, if you will. So, but I know about it. I've been supportive of it, and I've worked with people.
I would very much like to be in touch with you.
Yeah, you got to connect with Myla, please. She's in Santa Monica. So, and I think I recognize you from being in my jail cell in San Luis Obispo back in '84. So check your jail records. We got 63 people with us. It's great to have everybody. This is excellent, Maya. Justin LeBlanc, and then Wendy, and then Eric. Go ahead, Justin.
So to get kind of strategic, so that we, don't derail the train, joking with the current events. And I'm wondering if we are able to be strategic and not just throw spaghetti at the wall and say we have to just have conversations, and the feasibility on having more conversations, but to get an idea of, are there specific ways that we approach people? Is it, their personal project that, I really like this lake and I want to protect it, or this river and I want to protect it? Is it, I'm really into water issues in general? Is it, I actually believe in global climate change as the major issue, and anything that we need to solve? And, how do you avoid tripping hazards? Like, not everybody thinks that even though carbon is the problem, they can get rid of carbon, so how do we thread the needle with all this?
Well, the important thing is, first we got to get started. Now, look, as an activist, right? I don't have time for blathering conversation that doesn't get me anywhere, or interesting conversation that doesn't get me anywhere. I'm all about how do we get it done, right? And as you said, these conversations are an important part of the strategy of how do we get it done. It's a big question you ask, right? It's all going to depend on the dynamics. It's going to depend on the state. It's going to depend on the language. It's going to depend on the audience that you're talking to. And where in the strategy are we in terms of advancing our Green Amendment in the state? So really, Justin, what I would say is, you're like 10 steps ahead, which is awesome. And if you're in one of my Green Amendment states, that might actually be the step that we're at. But if we're just getting started, like in Mississippi or California, we need to start with getting together that dynamic group of leaders. It can be a small group, but we need to talk language. We need to talk who needs to be at the table and be part of the leadership team. And then we need to develop our strategy. And I'm not like, we don't have to do some big grand strategic plan before we get started, but the strategy has to be, okay, step one, we've got this language. We need to start to spread the word and figure out who needs to come to the table, right? We need to, and we do like this iterative step-by-step approach, working together, figuring out what we need to do and then doing it. But it all does begin with that question of what's the language? Who are the leaders we need to get into the room? And are we doing it through the legislative approach or through a people's initiative, right? Because that dramatically impacts, how that strategy evolves.
Great. Wendy, then we'll do Jeffrey, you'll get a second. And then Eric, go ahead, Wendy.
One group I wanted to propose reaching out to is people involved with something called community choice aggregation. So that's the essentially electric and gas and other energy side of things. You mentioned water before. This is another avenue for finding leaders.
Great.
Green Amendment, most Green Amendments, Florida is very unique because of its constitutional process. So where you can only pick a single subject. So we really had to focus on water. But all of our other Green Amendment states, it protects the rights to clean water and clean air, healthy soils, healthy ecosystems, stable climate, healthy environment. It, mandates that the state act as a trustee of the natural resources for the benefit of present and future generations. And we have that environmental justice language. So we really have the ability to reach, all activists and all pathways of advancing environmental protection through this really powerful strategy of constitutional Green Amendment protections.
You're
Harvey,
muted,
you're
Harvey.
mute.
My turn, it's Eric.
Wendy was next.
My turn, I'm
You're
Eric.
still muted, Harvey.
So I guess I'm on. Hi.
No, Eric, you're not. You're still on stack. It's me and then Jeffrey and then you. But we're trying to get Harvey to unmute. He's having some difficulty there. Let me see if I can help you with it. This is Harvey. You're
Good. There we go. Okay, Wendy, then Jeffrey for a minute, and then Eric. And then Maya, we're going to say goodbye to you at the top of the hour. So anybody else have a question for Maya, please jump in. Go ahead, Wendy.
Thank you. I told you guys she was amazing. I'm so excited to have her here. And we'll definitely have you back at some point when we get some updates and figure out further. I do want to mention that a lot in her book does talk about a lot of the frontline communities where people like have no choice but to live where they're being poisoned on a daily basis. And then when people do try to go through the court system, then they're still shut down because the legislature is bought out by the corporations. Someone mentioned Dolores Huerta. Unfortunately, Tatanka is not here today. I think it's his birthday actually, but we work in another group with the Dolores Huerta Foundation, so we'll connect with that. I wanted to ask Maya, and I'm gonna just quickly read a short part of the Pennsylvania amendment so people have a clear idea of it. But then I want to ask, because in the book you talk about the way that like dredging to expand waterways for traffic is it's impairing like the sturgeon, the Delaware sturgeon or the Atlantic sturgeon has been around for like hundreds of millions of years and it's about to go extinct because of our practices. I'm just going to really quickly read this part real quick. This is just Pennsylvania. The people have a right to clean air, pure water, and the preservation of the natural, scenic, historic, and aesthetic values of the environment. Pennsylvania's public natural resources are the common property of all people, including generations yet to come. As trustees of these resources, the Commonwealth shall conserve and maintain them for the benefit of all people. So that's a start. And so, yeah, if you want to talk about just the frontline communities and the endangered species and how in practice this would actually work, because again, we had Chuck O'Neill last year a couple times where he in Orlando, Orange County, they passed a rights in nature ordinance. And he's fighting in court right now because the state went and preempted it, even though they had 89% of the vote. So that's the power of what she's doing. No legislature, no rogue government can come and preempt it, no matter who they think they are. Thank you so much, Maya.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Wendy.
Wendy.
That's awesome.
Jeffrey, unmute Jeffrey. Eric, you're unmuted. Go ahead real quickly, please.
Which first, Jeffrey or Eric?
Go ahead, Eric.
Okay, so first quick point is, I want people to know that Akili is an amazing person. Met him in 1988 on the Jesse Jackson campaign, and he's been an advisor and a mentor for 35 years, very trustworthy. People who want to help him really ought to consider it. He's wonderful. Question for the guest. Some of the smartest people I talk to about climate are think it's very important to put a price on carbon. Is there any way for these state constitutional amendments to move us in that direction, or are these kind of orthogonal? Thanks so much.
Yeah, no, I think the social cost of carbon is very important in a lot of forums, but you wouldn't explicitly include that in a green amendment. We can't include all the details. Like every Bill of Rights provision, we need to keep it broad so it covers everything. But because many green amendments specifically include the right to a stable climate, and because all green amendments include language and placement that allows us to get to the climate issue, it can most certainly be value added in advancing those kinds of critical strategies.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Jeffrey, very quickly, please, Jeffrey.
All right. All righty. I also got a question if we do represent us, but okay, here's my question. Here's my thing I want to say to you. I like what you're proposing, Maya, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes. All right. Yeah. I'm working on a game that can help get more people to involved in this, in what we're doing, especially the green stuff, green economy and all that. So I thought maybe you might want to lend your assistance and help out.
Okay, so Jeffrey,
feel free to get in touch. I'm always open to good ideas.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Much appreciated. Thank you for that. Maya, it's been a pleasure to have you on. And this idea of a green amendment is very good, and I hope people will get your book. Does anyone else have a question for Wendy, Maya, before we rock and roll? And Akili, it's great that you chimed in. We have a ton of people in Los Angeles who can work with you on your campaign for the assembly. I also knew Tom Hayden. He was I went to the University of Michigan as I did, and he was an amazing guy. So any friend of Tom Hayden's is a friend of our cause. Okay, and you should be in touch with Dick and Sharon, by the way, at progressive.com. They're very influential website.
Can I also chime in and say I worked with the farm workers in Delano in 1965 at the beginning of the grape strike. And perhaps I don't know when you were there, Baba, but perhaps we were there together. And I really look forward to working with you, and I hope that we'll be in touch.
Okay, all right, everybody. I want to say, since we're at the top of the hour, it's been wonderful having Maya and Baba and a really great discussion. My listeners at Progressive Radio Network, prn.live. This hour is pretty much over. We will be continuing another hour. If you want to listen to the rest of our conversation, please go to electionprotection2024.org and join us there, electionprotection2024.org. You can pick up the rest of the conversation, which will proceed for another hour. So thank you again, both of you, and so many other people. Thank you, Frank Knapp, also for your report on the business group, Business for Democracy. If you come back with us from time to time, we'd be glad to have you on. Okay, I want to commemorate here. We're going to talk about Florida in a minute, and the rise of DeFascism, DeFascism, the new word in Florida. I do want to note that today, or this week, Ray McClendon, it's good to see you on with us, and Dennis Bernstein, you're still with us, so glad to have you with us both. I do want to say that this is the 12th week, the year of the 12th week, 12th year this week of the Fukushima disaster. And I do have a piece at Counterpunch, which is, the link was in the notice I sent out, and counterpunch.org. And they are still creating 150,000 tons of radioactive water every day at Fukushima, 12 years after. The day before Fukushima happened, if you would have asked, there you go, if you had asked any so-called expert, 150 tons of irradiated water every day at Fukushima. If you had asked the industry a day before Fukushima, can a General Electric reactor blow up? They would have said no, and they would have told you were an incredible, fanatic with no facts behind you. And then the next day, the 4 reactors blew up. They actually blew up at Fukushima. They were hydrogen explosions, but if you look at the videotapes of the explosions, and there were steady state cameras at the site, the explosion at Unit 3 at Fukushima looks very suspiciously like a mushroom cloud. And Fukushima Unit 3 had extremely hyper radioactive fuel in it, MOX fuel, from the recycling process. And it is quite likely that there may have been some kind of fission explosion at Unit 3, as there may well have been at Chernobyl, by the way. And so, let's get real here. All the reactors need to shut. The explosion at Fukushima 12 years ago actually took down 6 reactors because they shut units 5 and 6, even though they weren't allegedly affected. And that's a 60 billion. If you take net present value of those reactors at 10 billion, that's a $60 billion accident. There's no other accident in history that cost flat out, in a matter of 10 minutes, $60 billion. And so all these clowns who are running around telling us about the benefits of nuclear power, come on, forget about it. This is 12 years now. Nothing's better at Fukushima. They're sitting on thousands of tons of radioactive liquid. The government there wants to dump them into the Pacific Ocean. People are resisting. It's like an uncontrolled experiment. Let's see what, 10,000, 100,000, 1 million tons of radioactive water will do to the Pacific Ocean. So, and any one of these blow-ups could occur at an American reactor now. And, we're talking about Fukushima. We're also talking about Diablo Canyon, about Perry, about Davis-Besse. It's time, finally, we got off this insane experiment with atomic power. We're also going to go deeper now into Ohio and what's happening there. But first, we want to get a report. Carolina and Wendy in the fascist Republic of Florida, tell us the latest about what's happening there, please. And we also want to deal in a minute with Joe Biden's decision to green light this drilling in Alaska. As far as I'm concerned, by the way, that's a monumental landmark on the tombstone of the Democratic Party. And I was agnostic about whether Biden should run again in 24, but he has now made a very major group of opponents to his continued tenure. This is outrageous what he did in today in approving this drilling in the Arctic. We can't stand for that, and he's got to. We got to deal with him on this. Let's go to Florida now. While you still can speak openly in Florida, Carolina and Wendy, do you want to give us an update of what's happening there?
Sure. Thanks. Yeah, and I figure Carolina's really an expert. There's a lot of stuff going on with like education and the things that are happening there. So I thought I'd let Carolina defer to her for that, with her experience as an adjunct professor. And there's so much going on with the environment, with like tort reform, and it's really almost just mind-boggling, like on where to start even. I'll actually pass it over to Carolina if she wants to talk a little bit about the education, and she's doing some amazing stuff with tracking some of these bills. So if there's anything that you want to throw in as well that you have in your mind, and then I'll fill in some of the gaps with some of these egregious things with the environment, tenants laws. I mean, and we also have 6 weeks abortion ban now from 15. So yeah, thank you for being with us, Carolina.
Well, let me ask you the lead question here on Florida. Is it fair to call Ron DeSantis a fascist?
Well, it could cost you $35,000 now. You could get a fine. No, seriously, there's a bill that would charge you a fine of $30,000, $35,000 to call a Republican or a representative racist or discriminatory. The thing we talked about last week where they were gonna make bloggers register with the state is kind of DOA. DeSantis is saying he wouldn't sign it, but I think a lot of these things, even though they know that they wouldn't stand up to constitutional challenge, they're just trying to push the needle just to establish a more fascist paradigm. So and to normalize it, and it's not cool. It's not cool. Yeah. And then you have Biden on the other hand again, where he's just lost every youth vote in the country. There's no way anyone that has any kind of future ahead of them is going to show up at the polls. And the DNC is basically in hibernation in Florida and everywhere else. So, but thanks to Biden, there's a chance we can look forward to what's happening in Florida spreading nationwide. So, yeah.
Okay, Carolina, do you want to give us a few minutes, and then we're going to move into other environmental stuff?
Sure. I wanted to talk about a few bills that are happening over here, just so that you see an idea of how legislation looks in a state where we have a super minority and a fascist governor.
By the way, Ray McClendon is on the phone from Georgia, and he's looking at a lot of the same things. So, Ray, some of this will sound familiar to you, and maybe you can jump in and make the connection between Florida and Georgia there. So go ahead.
Yes, so it's a fascist governor that also has all of his lackeys in legislation. So we have Bill 1069 that declares sex as a binary thing, so only female and male, and it teaches abstinence. It also bans every content that it's related to sex until an appropriate age that it's determined by legislation, but the bills are not very explicit.
I think the Republicans generally consider 64 to be a safe age to discuss sex. So,
apparently,
to discuss sex, right?
Yeah, we have more book bans coming. There's also a ban of social media in schools. There's not only the 6 weeks abortion ban, but there's an additional bill that urges Congress to ban abortion. Then There's also more homeowners associations restrictions, and the associations are also going to have more alternatives to how they conduct their business. There's also a bill that removes some of the requirements for the death penalty. That's Bill 450. There's also one that adds some laxity for that same death penalty. Oftentimes here in Florida, we have two bills that are associated, one in the House and the Senate, but there's also sometimes that they add an additional third over there to see if one is failing, then they're moving on with the next one, so they have like a backup. It's pretty bad. There's also another bill that it's on the ethics, district school board elections. So the reason for that is that they're trying to put more conservatives in those districts so that they have more chances of passing all of these regulations with the list of courses that are allowed to be taught in Florida, the list of books that they are allowed to use. There's also a bill that removes tenure from Florida altogether.
Wow.
You name it. There's another bill that allows
They want to ban tenure at state universities?
banning tenure.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. They're ready for that? They want to ban
tenure. Yes. I'll give you the number if you want to.
And they also want to disqualify unions that have less than 60% enrollment and like any kind of automatic deductions, except for like police and those sort of things.
And make it an annual thing. So you may have made the 60% one year, but the next year you have to have still the 60. I can't remember the number. I'll put it in the chat when I find it. But there's also another bill that bans affirmative sex treatment in children, and it allows also anyone to denounce that, and if there's any concern for that, then the child protection services could come in and remove your child. A lot of parents of trans kids are moving out of state, actually. So yeah,
if you can post that list, that is mind-boggling. I mean, I can't.
I'll put it on the chat.
Please, yes. Wendy, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I have a few things here. I'll try to be as fast as I can. It's just, I mean, it literally like makes my synapse like disintegrate when I start thinking about these things and reading about them. It just, thank you, Carolina, for the awesome report. So, one thing that's just like amazing is that they're trying to use phosphogypsum to approve it for building roads as like a material for roads, and it's actually the radioactive waste from phosphate, converting the phosphate ore into what would be used for pesticides and fertilizers. And it's the fertilizer runoff that is like causing most of our issues with like toxic algae and the red tide. And they want to put this radioactive waste into building more roads because they're calling this the session of sprawl. So they're trying to like accommodate just building. I'm going to drop a link in the chat in a second for Friends of the Everglades has been doing really great work tracking some of this, and so is Vote Water. But we have here HB 439 and SB 1604 is land development and regulations. It would facilitate additional development and sprawl by eliminating the ability of local governments to reject the magistrate's recommendation to what can be defined as sprawl. They want governments to prepare business impact estimates before enacting proposed ordinance. So it would suspend there's just too much here. So that's one. There's another one here. It would shorten the time a local government has to approve or deny a building permit from 30 days to 9 days to look over a permit. And it would like there's just gonna be a lot more pressure for them to have to pass these things. This is great. It's the building permit application requires local governments to post update permitting information and the time frame during which local governments can request additional information. Sorry, there's so much here that I'm weeding through. There's a couple that I'm looking for. There's one here. It is would prohibit municipalities and counties from establishing their own regulations pertaining to water quality, water quantity, pollution control, pollution discharge or removal, wetlands, including delineation. I mean, any kind of, like what Maya was just talking about, any kind of local ordinances, you're not going to be allowed to do it. There's another one here, land development initiative and referendum process would prohibit local initiatives and referendums on land development. And so those are some of the environmental ones. And there's actually like a lot more. Like I said, I'm like stuttering even just trying to talk about some of these things. There, one more quick one here. There's restrictions on any kind of regulation that would monitor greenhouse gas emissions or anything that has to do with climate change or temperature control. And if it would allow corporations to sue municipalities is SB 170. But then there's another one that if you want to sue a municipality or a corporation, then you could be liable for attorney's fees. So it's going to be a lot harder for citizens to be able to sue the government or corporations, but the government can sue the municipalities if they try to enact any kind of law. And once they start a lawsuit, then it suspends the law. Like it's like literally, it's like, it's really hard. And I think there's like 1,000 different, we would need a whole nother show to go through these. And Caroline has done an amazing job with putting together a spreadsheet where she's listed all of these things. But it's really hard to like not like cry and be paralyzed when you're looking at the things that they're trying to do. And then you think about this guy is like trying to run for president, and people like if that's the thing. It's like if people actually like read and saw on paper like what is trying to happen, as opposed to like the propaganda about like how great this guy is, like he has so much following, and it's really scary that it's like the people that they're all getting hurt, all their businesses are going to be hurt. I mean, this is the worst thing ever, and yet for some reason people think he's like awesome, and it's just because they need to kill their TV or something. I don't know.
Okay, so Ray McClendon, are you still with us, Ray, in Georgia? The Georgia legislature is doing a lot of similar stuff in terms of election protection. I guess Ray had to leave us, but it is mind-boggling. I think. Ray, are you with us now?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes. Does this a lot of what's going on in Florida with the legislature and the governor sound familiar to you in Georgia?
Well, some of the things do, but I have to tell you, Florida is turning into an outlier in a lot of ways. And what we've got to do is organize in Florida, similarly to what we did with the Georgia way. I think one of the things that DeSantis has been able to do is to convince people that he has a mandate, but really it was a lack of voter turnout among progressives and people of color in Florida, from what I understand. And Wendy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but he took that mandate and now they're running with it. And a big part of what we've got to do is begin investing in grassroots engagement in Florida in order to galvanize the progressive population and all of the minority population that are eligible voters in Florida. We've got to turn Florida around, but it starts now. This year is lost, but we need to start now in order to be ready for 2024.
Absolutely. Well, of course, as in Florida, DeSantis took very aggressive steps to prevent people of color from voting. They even arrested people in Florida for voting. Isn't that right, Wendy?
Yeah, I mean, and so I actually worked on the campaign as a petitioner, as a paid petitioner, but I loved doing it a lot. I really did. Being out there talking with people and everyone. I mean, it was a bipartisan support, even, because really conservatives inherently are supposed to like want the government out of their business, and it's a civil rights issue. So it had a lot of bipartisan support to give felons their rights back. And then they had to register with the state, so they got approval and had every reason to think that they were legal to vote. And then DeSantis set out this like police squad that he started to go and arrest people. But it's like it's even more than that, like where it's people are getting like purged from the voter rolls because they didn't follow up with, you know, what when they had to move because so many people are being evicted that they, you know, like I personally had to move like 10 times in like 2 years, and it was hard to keep up with my license with that every time my address changed. And so it's easy now to get purged from those voter rolls if your current living address doesn't match like where the DMV has you as.
Wendy, the voter rights groups in Florida need to be in touch with Ray and the voting rights groups in Georgia. I mean, you've clearly got a lot of repression going on in common with the same kinds of tactics. So we need to look at that. One last question about the Democratic Party in Florida. What kind of opposition is the Democratic Party putting up to these fascistic pieces of legislation?
Tweets every now and then. Yeah, some pushback from the legislators. The party itself, nothing yet.
There's a couple of bills, like there's, and I'll have to see who the sponsors are, and we can circle back with Ray. I know Anna Escamani. I'd love to get Escamani on sometime. Like she's
that would be awesome.
Yeah, she's a House representative, and she's actually like for the last 2 years been really like walking the walk, not just talking the talk, with putting forth a lot of really great climate bills. But also there's a couple of things to like kind of affirm the constitutional amendment that was preempted by the state. And it was only because like they used semantics, like so we have to be really careful when putting forth those amendments to not leave any loopholes for anyone that's nefarious. But there's
unfortunately there's like she is basically alone. There's very few other elected officials in legislation altogether, and then from those few, there's a few others that are voting Republican essentially. The bill that I just posted, HB1, defunding public education, had 2 Democrats voting in favor.
Yeah, I do want to say real quick. Oh, I'm sorry, just real quick. I just want to say thank you because we just got Nikki Fried to take over the Democratic chair when Carolina would have been such an amazing leader, but she got really shunned from that position. And a lot of the Democratic groups are trying to basically like kiss up to her, I'm just gonna say, and I don't agree with it. I think it's a terrible strategy. I think it's naive and well played, or terribly played, I mean, just in my opinion. And I think that true progressive ideals need to kind of get in their own vehicle and start giving another option that people can truly feel good about getting a part of, because there's no motivation to be a part of the establishment party because it's just driving over the overpass, I feel like. So that's my opinion on that.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Wendy and Carolina, for that terrifying report. I hope you'll be in touch with Ray McClendon. Maybe there's a Georgia NAACP, maybe there's a Florida NAACP you could reach out to. But this is really life and death here, and we're looking at. I don't have to tell you about Ron DeSantis and the terrifying stuff we're seeing. I will mention that there seems to be a consensus that Donald Trump is about to be indicted, and I don't know how that's going to play out with the race for the Republican nomination. But we all know that the specter of Ron DeSantis and it's really important that people know what's happening in Florida. So if you can publish a list of all these laws, and we'll send it around and discuss it next time, it's really, really important that we see exactly what they're doing in Florida, because it's really staggering. Thank you both. Thank you very much for that report. I don't know if anybody else is on the call from Florida, but here we are. We also want to talk now, moving ahead, we want to talk about what's happening downwind in Ohio from this train wreck. Steve Caruso, you're not quite exactly downwind, but can you fill us in real quickly And then we're going to talk about the Biden's move on the Arctic. And there's also one other thing. I'm sorry Tatanka's not with us. We'll get him on next week to discuss this. But news has broken that a former FBI agent has testified in public that Cointelpro was involved in infiltrating the American Indian movement. So I want to come, once I get going on that, I won't stop. So I want to come back on that in a minute. It's a very important situation. I'll repeat it. The FBI Cointelpro operation, which was involved in sabotaging movement groups, apparently infiltrated the American Indian movement in the 70s. And this is critical, especially because we still have Leonard Peltier in prison. So let's come back to that in a minute. Steve Caruso, do you want to give us a report on what's happening downwind in Ohio at East Palestine?
Yeah, well, I'm about 125 miles southwest. So towards the center of the state there on the upper right side up by Pennsylvania, next to the new shell cracking plant up there where all this natural gas that's being fracked out of the state is coagulating into little nurdles to be shipped down the tracks and everything else. You can think, I don't know, they're making vinyl chloride there. It looks like the train was going there, but anyway, we have EPA stepped in and said that, you know, they're taking control of what's getting done up there. They ordered the railroad to remove more soil that they thought they just shoved to the side. The railroad would shove to the side, but they got caught. And like Wendy was saying earlier, that the environmental evaluation is done by a private company hired by the railroad that's gobbling up all these other environmental companies, you know, so they can control the agenda. And the EPA, I think, had independently put some monitors out there. There was the talk of the dioxin being present because you burn plastic, you get dioxin. You hear the talk of phosgene, which is a gas from World War I, being present when you burn vinyl chloride. Dioxin as a poison, one little aspirin-sized pill cut into 32 million pieces will, you know, affect 32 million people.
Well,
So,
let me very quickly, we learned this because of the trash burner in Columbus, Ohio, which was burning plastic and creating dioxin. Dioxin is pound for pound or molecule for molecule. There is only one known element that's more toxic than dioxin, and that's plutonium. If you breathe in a single molecule, atom of plutonium, you can get lung cancer, and dioxin is right there with plutonium as a lethal agent. So there you go. Sorry.
Yeah, well, with all the radiation going on, with the fracking industry spreading brine onto the roads throughout part of the state, not the whole state. Some districts say they're not using it, and that's great. We even contacted our local folks here, and they said, no, we're not doing that. But the radiation from that, and then you've got piping going on where they're processing nuclear fuel. They are actually processing. I also found that the federal government has a contract with Russia to sell radioactive material to Russia, which is still being honored, apparently. I haven't heard hide nor hair of anything from anybody about that, if it's being honored or not. If anybody wants to talk about that, raise your hand if you know anything about that contract of nuclear material going to Russia at this point that was formally agreed on, I guess, with Russia. So all the houses down there in Piketon are irradiated. The attics, they've taken dust from attics. And these are houses that aren't right immediately close to the plant, but the whole area is just a conflagration of radiation. The whole country, probably there's somebody speaking up on that and saying how high the levels are around the country, period. So, you're muted, Harvey. You're not.
Okay, there we go. All right, so in Ohio now, they basically, the company is saying they're not going to pay compensation. Is that right? Steve,
They said everything's on the table, but you know what happens? Bernie asked them, they said, Bernie says, you're going to pay for everybody's health care there, right? And they said, oh, everything's on the table. So
yeah, right. And
they
they're
had the
under,
hearings, you know, they had the hearings in DC last week and they didn't invite any of the residents. What the heck?
who held the hearing?
Congress, I think the Senate.
Okay. I mean, it's really sick what's going on there. Beyond sick. Okay, thank you for that report, Steve. We still have 56 people on the call after an hour and a half. You people are really powerfully persistent. Let me tell you, it's great. I want to mention real quickly, if anybody wants to say anything about Biden and the Arctic. I watched CNN today on the exercise bike, and you know, Carol King was on. It's an enormous amount of land, many thousands of acres that he's opening up in the Alaska, and he explicitly, very clearly, in the campaign, they showed tape of him saying he would not do this. Very clear, exactly what he said he would not do during the campaign, he's doing today. I mean, you know, I don't have to tell this group, it's infuriating beyond belief. And I think it's going to have a very significant impact on the election. There's no way around this stuff. He came out, he went to Alaska. I mean, he said, I am not going to allow this to happen. And now he's not only allowing it to happen, it's also happening in the Gulf of Mexico. You know, it's infuriating, as well as his subsidies for nuclear energy and the attacks on solar. Wendy, did you want to say something? I want to call on Ron Leonard to fill us in a little bit on the further outrages that are happening.
Yeah, it is. It's just mind-boggling. Like, I'm just like stumped. I can't even, it's hard to even speak, you know, when we really try to put our mind around the acceleration of this destruction, like as if all of posterity isn't on the line. I mean, come on. Yeah, like, and this relates to Alaska as well, kind of talking about what Stephen was talking about. But I mean, eventually at some point, there's going to be a spill or something. And what Stephen was referring to, and I put a link in the chat for the company that's doing the testing. Like, it's the corporation that's in charge of testing the waters to see if it's safe for people to go in or to drink or anything. And they're actually, like you said, they're buying up all the other small companies, so that there's just this massive monopoly that the government is going to turn to anytime there's a natural or non-natural disaster, to say, hey, can you let us know if this is safe for people, even though it's the corporation, like they're being paid for by the people that caused the disaster. And oh my God, I just jumped right out of my mind the other thing that I was going to say.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I'll have to.
All right, well, Ron Leonard has some mind-boggling stuff that's happening where they're trying to kill solar even more than they've been killing it. Ron, could you tell me what you told me about the most recent attack on solar in California?
I just thought, I'm sorry, I thought of the one other quick little point. I'm so sorry, but I just want to say when BP spilled all the oil, and they actually did pay like $50 billion, which this company is refusing to do. Everyone who took a settlement, and same thing with the 9/11 families, they actually had to sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, saying that they would never investigate, or they would never ask questions. They would never be able to talk about anything related to the incident if they wanted to recover the compensation for the way that the company destroyed their lives. And those are the people that are in charge of the consequences and the externalities that we're handing over our environment to these corporations. This is the only way that people will be able to recover later. Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt. Thank you.
All right, go ahead. Thank you. Ron, can you tell us about this latest assault on solar?
Sure. I'd like to tell you about this other good deal besides the one that Wendy just mentioned. A California company called Sonova is a large installer of solar systems, mostly residential. That's how California got companies like that to 1.5 million solar roofs. Well, starting next month, If you put a solar system on your house, Harvey, you will not really get recompensed for putting out electricity on the grid like you did if you had one on your house already this month. And what happened is that the cost of power being 30 cents, you would only get 5 cents if you gave power back to the grid. Now, Sonova figured out that that's going to cut into their business. I mean, who's going to put a solar system on their house using their money where they don't even get reimbursed from the power that they give to their neighborhood, and the utility takes that power and sells it to their neighbors at 30 cents? What a deal. Well, Sonova said, haha, I got a way around this. I'm going to put batteries on all these solar systems from now on. And the battery is available for putting power into your house when the power is not on, or conversely, being combined with all your neighbors' solar systems with batteries and creating a virtual power plant. And those virtual power plants are very powerful, both in terms of being reimbursed at times of need on the grid, and also keeping the grid active. Actually, twice last year in 100-degree temperatures, we found out that the grid would have collapsed except for these solar systems that provided power back to the system and kept the lights on. So Sonova put in a proposal to be a company that aggregated solar power systems called a virtual power plant and sell that power back to the grid in terms of when the utility needs it. And the utility commission said, no, you can't do that. What an outrageous thing to do, especially when we know that clean power is the goal of California. And then the choice for Sonova or anybody else that would want to do this is to actually register as a monopoly power provider, a utility, costing millions of dollars of paperwork and time for no reason whatsoever. This is just another stranglehold that the utilities have on the grid, allowing ratepayers to have an out when we see nationwide power is increasing 17.5% a year, except for places like California and New York and probably Florida and definitely Texas, where it's going up much faster than that, and people are incapable of paying the utility bill. What a deal.
Yeah. I mean, you
We gotta
know,
write a book.
words fail me.
I know.
Here they're giving Diablo Canyon $1 billion in state money, $1 billion plus in Fed money. They're claiming that the reason they have to do it is because California did not meet the solarization needs that were built into the deal that shut Diablo in 2016. And now they're turning around and doing everything they can to stop solar power in California. I mean,
catch-22. This is proverbial catch-22.
The death wish. These people are indescribable. Steve Caruso, did you want to jump in?
FPL is actually owned by Next Era Energy. Say that 5 times. And they're apparently putting in a lot of solar projects around the country. So what, are they playing both sides of the deck?
This is a very good idea for them, because when they use ratepayers' money to put in a solar system and then charge those same ratepayers, like they did in Florida, retail rates for that solar system, they prevent people like homeowners from escaping that possible clause, and they also prevent 40% of homeowners, of that 1.5 million homeowners in California, are low-income people that really can't afford to get strangled by these rate increases.
And we do have a California solar panel owner. Paul Newman has solar panels on his house, and I think, Paul, at some point they're going to come and arrest you for having solar energy on your home. That's the next step. So and Nancy has got her thumb up there.
My neighbors are from the south of me has solar panels, and in the north of me He was the CTO of 20th Century Fox, chief, tech officer and everything. And, they're all upset. But even I've contacted LA Solar, and a lot of these guys don't know what this is going on.
Next month, they are going to find out.
It's just amazing.
It's really unbelievable and so incredibly infuriating. Jeffrey,
We
very
should
quickly.
discuss how this all started, where the utilities got together and put a $1.7 million, no, $7.1 million slush fund together to convince with a public campaign that we really don't need solar on roofs. That's foolish.
Are you serious about the people being arrested for having solar on their roofs? Because we have me and my mother have solar on our roofs.
No,
It's not yet anyway, but
they'll just pull the plug.
I'm sure Ron DeSantis will be glad to arrest anybody with a solar panel. Isn't that right, Wendy? Go ahead, Wendy.
Well, it's actually illegal to capture rainwater in Florida. So yeah, for real. Like that's
Really?
actually a real thing.
Probably a good
make
idea.
Yeah, they try to make it so you couldn't have front yard gardens, but yeah, it's illegal to capture rainwater. But
Is it
yeah,
illegal?
yeah,
It's illegal to capture rainwater?
yeah. I'll find more information and we can talk about it later. Yeah, it's it's been like that for a couple of years now.
They're probably afraid of what's coming in the rainwater.
Yeah, well, so NextEra, they also own Matrix, and Ron just alluded a little bit to the campaign that they were busted, and this is like where the attorney general is kind of failing, and just all the press in general. They were busted owning a bunch of newspaper publications, propping up false candidates, and just making making a giant resistance to anyone that was trying to create any kind of decentralization. Again, I've talked before about all the ballot initiatives that we tried to do just to create a regulatory framework that would allow for even just investor-owned competition, even let alone just to have little co-ops and things, but they've literally legalized this monopoly. And NextEra, they're actually out of Georgia. They're the ones that are the puppet masters behind it. But they basically even though they're putting in a lot of it's kind of a token to say, oh look, we're doing so great for solar, we're doing so much for it, but really that just limits. That's just saying, okay, it's controlled opposition. It's saying oh, we've done it, so we're going to be able to control how much there actually is, and they can still control, because then they'll need to know, well, how much they need to do to maintain the natural gas that they're bringing in and importing, or whatever fossil fuels or whatever it is. So it's just basically controlling the entire industry. But this whole Matrix thing, the whole NextEra thing, that should hopefully what's happening in Ohio will spread to Florida, because I'm sure that there's so many similarities on what they would find with the corruption.
There's
The
no
Public
corruption
Service
in
Commission.
Florida. That couldn't be.
Yeah, how could there be corruption in Florida? Yeah, I will say this just for point of information. FP&L is the #1 developer of wind farms in America. They do these big, they're the ones who do these big wind farms, and General Electric is the #1 manufacturer of industrial scale windmills in America. So, there you go. Steve has put up, what is this, Steve? Oh, this is money laundering. Well, of course.
This is corruption that's tied to Florida out of Alabama. I mean, the long arm of the scofflaws.
Well, okay. We also have to understand, by the way, that this month, the 2 reactors in Georgia at Plant Vogtle, the last 2 big nuclear plants in America, are scheduled. At least one of them, they claim, has gone critical. These 2 reactors were begun in the teens. Obama gave them an $8.3 billion federal guaranteed loan to build these reactors. They were supposed to be online 5 or 6 years ago. They were supposed to cost $14 billion. They're coming online at $35 billion, well over twice what they were originally, about 2.5 times what they were originally supposed to cost. And yet you have people like Oliver Stone running around advocating nuclear power. Absolutely insane.
And you know how many houses they're going to supply with those plants?
3.
500,000. That's
Yeah,
it.
right.
500,000 homes from those nuclear plants in Georgia, and they spent
If they
39 billion.
operate, right? If they operate and if they don't explode, God help us.
Wait till they find out how much they charge for that electricity. Oh,
Right.
baby.
There's not a single nuclear plant in the United States that can compete with renewable energy at this point in time. You have 92 reactors, plus these 2 now in Georgia, and they're all way more expensive than renewables, especially if you take into account the cost of disposing of the waste, which they don't know how to do at this point in time. So at any rate, I want to jump before we run out of time. We still have 54 people with us too, and I wish Tatanka was on the call. We'll have him next week. But this idea of the infiltration of the American Indian movement by COINTELPRO. I want to tell you my personal experience with COINTELPRO, which is relevant to this. And of course, Leonard Peltier is still in prison, and he could be there very likely because of the COINTELPRO operation. So in 1968, 768, I was, before most of you were born, I was involved with a radical news service called Liberation News Service. And there is a documentary about this. It's called Liberation News Service Under the Ground. And we were supplying the underground press in America with a copy. And Dennis, I'll get through this real quick, unless you got to leave. Dennis, do you have to leave? Do you want to chime in on this real quick before you go?
I'll come in after you, Harv.
Okay. So, and I'll make it as quick as I can. So I helped found this news service with Marshall Bloom, Ray Mungo, and a few others. We were extremely successful in that we were supplying underground papers all over the country. And we were in DC, and there was just a small group of us. And we moved to New York, and our organization wound up being 20, 30 people. And as so often happens, everybody got on everybody else's throat. And there were really ugly accusations, anti-gay accusations, all this, hardcore political rhetoric, blah, blah, blah. And we wound up having a split in the news service, which worked out incredibly well for me. And I'll talk about it another time, but that's how my hippie farm got started. It was a really great moment in history, actually, and I hope J. Edgar Hoover is turning over in his grave. But the reality is we found out in the 70s that we were in fact infiltrated by COINTELPRO, the FBI anti-radical subversion operation. And the split would not have happened without COINTELPRO. We don't know who the actual agents were, but we're pretty sure they were on both sides of the issue. And their job was not to find out information, as you would expect from a Bureau of Investigation, but to actually destroy the news service. And they had COINTELPRO agents in peace groups all over the country. In most cases, they would go into a peace group that was committed to nonviolence and get them to be violent. That was part of their deal. Taxpayer money infiltrating peace groups and turning them to violence. Is that what our tax money is supposed to go to? So we now find out from testimony from an former FBI guy that COINTELPRO was in fact active, as you would expect, inside the American Indian movement. And their mission was to get people inside of AIM to, quote, kill each other, unquote. And so now we have Leonard Peltier in prison, and you got to believe that the COINTELPRO was involved in, he was an AIM founder, and you got to believe that COINTELPRO was involved in all that. So any COINTELPRO agents on this call, raise your hand. No, sorry. Dennis, go ahead. Dennis, did you want to jump in? Dennis Bernstein, are you unmuted? Let's get you unmuted here. And by the way, I won't pursue it further. I'll just say one word, Pacifica. Okay, Dennis.
Did you have to do that? Oh, did you have to do that?
No, go
Okay.
ahead.
I think I'm good now. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. So, COINTELPRO, Harv. First of all, I highly recommend that you invite Bill Means, co-founder of the American Indian Movement,
I will do that.
to come and tell this story, because he tells it will take the top of your heads off, and he witnessed it with his brothers firsthand. They're still fighting for Leonard Peltier. Really, Bill is the co-founder of the American Indian Movement, and he's also the co-founder of the International Indian Treaty Council. So he knows more about broken treaties and US policy than just about anybody on the face of the earth. He has lectured before the United Nations. He's done tours where he brings the United Nations into different reservations to demonstrate how there's a third world country and first world land. But I just want to tell you a COINTELPRO story. In the early 1990s, I don't know if anybody remembers, there were dozens, over 100 Black churches were burned throughout the South. And so I went down south with a wonderful reporter at the time, Ron Nixon. He was the head of Southern Exposure at the time. He grew up in Western Alabama. He knew Alabama and Selma. We began to investigate the church burnings. One of the first meetings we had was with the chief of law enforcement from Mississippi. But I'm just telling you this story because this is where all the COINTEL program people went. The director of public safety for Mississippi was a man by the name of Jim Ingram. He was number 3 in the COINTEL program. When I walked into his office to investigate what he's doing about all the church burnings, there was a picture of him shaking hands with J. Edgar Hoover on the wall, and I kid you not, Dixie was playing. So did we expect him to investigate Black church burnings? The next day, Ron and I were death called in our room. We were on our way down to speak with Obie Clark, who would tell us from Meridian, Mississippi. Obie Clark was the head of the NAACP, and he was also the head of Obie's funeral home. And when we got there, we told him, Jim Ingram told us to ask Black people what they thought of him. Did he do a good job fighting for civil rights? And he says, you tell Jim Ingram to get his ass down here. And I'll remind him that he was the one who began the rumor about the 3 civil rights workers being kidnapped, but as an NAACP plot to get publicity. Remember, the day before we met with Jim Ingram, he was meeting with Clinton, with all the other Southern attorney generals. They were all going to fight against the church burnings. And believe me, I could go on and on. I did 2 documentaries for Democracy Now!, mini documentaries, and you can check them out. But I'm just saying, this is all these people, what's happening now, the extreme right movement, this is all out of that movement and that COINTEL program. It was a model. That's it.
It's so infuriating that the news service, to give you an idea, the level of sophistication of this COINTELPRO operation. And Dennis, thank you for that. It's mind-boggling, your story. And 100 Black churches. I mean, come on, it's just amazing. After they split up our news service, they circulated a letter in the tone of voice of the New Left at the time, which was perfectly designed to cause ill feeling throughout the movement. And they wrote this letter at the FBI and then put it out there, and Hoover personally signed off on it and put it out there in the underground papers as if it had come from a leftist. And it created tremendous ill will throughout the movement. So whenever I see people internally destructive of an organization, I always question, who are they really? Mila Reeson and then Wendy. Mila?
Hey, thanks, Harvey. Yeah. I was involved for many years as a community organizer in New Mexico, fighting a dump for plutonium contaminated nuclear weapons waste. And I have no doubt that at that time, $6 billion project was infiltrated based on all of the extraordinary disruptive behavior of some of the people who came into our organization and just relentlessly worked to undermine our effort. But I also wanted to talk about, Amy Goodman years ago featured a story about a small peace group, a small a church group that was working for peace. And one day they saw in the newspaper that someone that they knew by another name had died in a motorcycle accident. And that person worked for the FBI, I believe, and was just feeding information. So there are all of these different levels that go on. There's disruption, there's information gathering, and then of course you have the files that were liberated, the FBI files that were liberated on the East Coast. That one of the things that was revealed was that there was a woman who was trusted, very helpful in the draft resistor movement in the San Francisco Bay Area, who had served as a secretary. And when the files of the FBI headquarters in the East were broken into by a group of activists, they found that this woman was feeding information to the FBI about all the people who were resisting the draft during the Vietnam War. So it's, it's very pervasive. And to think, I agree. I mean, when you think of Pacifica, you just wonder, who is paying some of these people to hobble Pacifica Radio and prevent it from being the great beacon of truth and information that it has the potential of being. And in spite of that, Dennis Bernstein has been doing phenomenal work, but we're really fighting against people who are organized and have a lot of money and have a lot of clout and want to undermine our work.
Right, as we say in some of our meetings, that some of these people, if not being paid, they're missing a paycheck. Thank you for that, Wendy, and then Ron. And we are actually almost out of time, but we can stick with it for a while. Wendy, you want to comment, and then Ron.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I just want to mention about how a lot of this started with the Black Panther movement, and the reason that they were targeted so hard is because they were doing such an awesome job of community organizing by setting up like pantries and clinics and, just really getting on the ground to empower the disempowered. And I think they were a threat too, because, they'd armed themselves. They had never used violence, but they were just defending themselves because violence was brought upon them. But it was just such a massive threat to see the community empowering itself. And then you look at what happened with Fred Hampton, who, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people on this call know the name, but for anyone who doesn't, like, he was 22, 23 years old, just this powerful organizer, and he was murdered in his bed while his pregnant girlfriend was sleeping next to him. And they kept claiming that he drew the gun on them first, but then they later found that they just, I mean, like, if you see the pictures, like, it's just, there's bullet holes everywhere. But
well, the FBI made very little compunction about having just executed Fred Hampton and Mark Clark. I mean, they didn't really bother to kind of excuse it. It was just a murder, and they did it.
I think that's what they did. I did want to just quickly say like two really quick things. Like, one, it's like the tactic is kind of just become like a playbook thing for any kind of infiltration, like just on a small level. Like I have a water forum on Facebook for Fort Lauderdale water crisis, and ever since the privatization, every day I've actually had to bring in a moderator, because every day I'm having to delete these like trolling posts where they're putting like, it's like it's for in 3 years, it's only happened since the privatization. But one other thing that I want to say is I don't know if anyone knows that Tupac Shakur's mother was a Black Panther, and while she was pregnant with him, she was arrested by the FBI, and she went up against them in court defending herself and won while she was pregnant with Tupac. I don't know if her name's Afeni Shakur, and it's just a really interesting piece of history that I don't know if a lot of people know about, but they had a whole case built up against her through Cointelpro, and she took it to the courts herself and won while pregnant with Tupac.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Good for her. Ron and Dennis.
So this is a good time to introduce the off-cursed name Tricky Dick Nixon, who many people thought invented dirty tricks, but he didn't, but he knew how to work them. And the one that he worked very well was on Earth Day in 1971 and involves a little-known term that you probably know, Harvey. It's called posse comitatus, which means that you do not want to have the army involved in civilian politics or spying on the people of the nation. And what occurred on Earth Day was that the Army Intelligence Corps was used to infiltrate all the exhibits and all the people there on Earth Day in Manhattan. I saw them personally. I saw it happen. Finally, it came out years later that they did this, but it's probably one of the egregious portions of the nation using its troops to spy on its citizens, doing illegal acts and trying to help the environment. Terrible.
I just want to say, Obama ended posse comitatus in 2011. I just want to say that, like, that we don't have that line anymore, that police can use military force totally legal.
But they right. Dennis, thank you for that, Wendy. And thank you, Ron. Dennis?
Just a note on how flagrant these violations are and how free the racists feel. Back when I was doing this church burning investigation, there was a revelation, you may remember. Some of the local leaders of the ATM and the FBI would have special old boy parties where they would have jelly bean counting contests and watermelon rolling contests. These were organized by high officials in the FBI and the ATF. They were all participating. I have the catalog. They literally had the courage to put it into a book and to like circulate it locally. Meanwhile, all those church burnings that I was investigating in Alabama, the Attorney General at the time was Jefferson Beauregard Sessions. And he turned almost every investigation into an investigation of why did these Black people burn their own churches and use it as an excuse to accuse us of voter fraud. He then became the Attorney General, and everybody was surprised that Donald Trump was a racist. And by the way, we found a local elected sheriff there who lived in the hometown of Jefferson Beauregard Sessions, who had proof that he was being death threatened by some of the old boy friends of Jefferson Beauregard Sessions. He had the proof. The sheriff, the elected sheriff, Black sheriff, had the proof, and he couldn't do a thing about it. I mean, it's so deep, and most Northerners don't get this version of racism.
Oh my God. Well, listen, I think next week I will take your advice, Dennis, and if you have any contacts for Bill Means, let me know, and we'll get him on and we'll do another special session on this. I mean, especially with the rise of DeSantis, this kind of stuff is really going to be even more accelerated, more common. And, I want to know, to begin with, how much of the Democratic Party leadership is actually hired by Steve Bannon. So there we have another question. Well, it's 7 o'clock, everybody, Eastern time. We still have 50 people on, 47 now. It's mind-boggling. You're an incredible group. And if anybody else has anything they want to raise,
can I add one more fact? Can I just add one more detail? There's so many horrifying details, but when we got to Meridian, Mississippi, and spoke with Obie Clark of the NAACP, he told us 2 quick stories. One, that the 1,000-pound monument that they had built for James Chaney, they still, to that day, couldn't keep it standing. The Klan, every time they stood it up, the Klan knocked it over. Mrs. Chaney, at that time, 1993, was still afraid to come back to the South and was essentially considered herself in hiding from the violence. But that's, I mean, and every detail makes it worse.
Yeah, really. Myla, thank
I
you.
just wanted to circle back one more time to Fukushima. Am I right, Harvey? Were you there before the atomic reactors were built, before the plant was built? Did you warn against citing some part of the plant not on the bluff above at a higher elevation?
Well, here's the story.
Remember that. Is that true?
So I was in Japan in 1975, and then we came back in 78 and 6. And I was at a demonstration. Tens of millions of people in Japan said, do not build a nuclear power plant in an earthquake zone that's washed by tsunamis. Everybody knew it was an earthquake zone. Everybody knew there were tsunamis there, and people marched, and I was in a march, I believe it was in 77 or 78, where people were carrying signs, don't build Fukushima. The march was probably in Tokyo. And I wrote about it in the Progressive magazine, saying, look at these crazy people building these two nuclear plants in an earthquake zone washed by tsunamis. But I was never actually at Fukushima. But you can go back to the archives of the Progressive magazine in 1977, and I covered this march where people were carrying signs, don't build Fukushima. So there you go. You know, it's not like we weren't warned, for God's sakes. No, thank you for remembering that. I appreciate it. Steve Caruso.
Yeah, Tom Hartman a couple weeks ago, he was off last week, but somebody called up and said that the police are being propagandized or told to kill people by some guy on YouTube promoting this, that, you know, if you can kill people, you know, and you see this recent spate of people just getting shot without provocation. And this, I think, I haven't found it yet, and it's been on my back burner, but if anybody knows anything about that, contact us, let us know, or if you want to talk about it, that'd be great. Thanks.
Okay. Well, next week, Dennis, if you can help me reach Bill Means, and we'll have Tatanka on with us, and we'll link this Cointelpro revelation to Leonard Peltier, which clearly there needs to be a link there, and maybe you'll want to talk about it on the show. But I'll dig up, if you haven't seen it, the interview with the FBI, former FBI guy. I guess he had a come to Jesus moment and revealed the Cointel presence in AIM. All right, everybody. I'm always wiped out after these calls, but it couldn't be. I'll go take a sauna. Actually, it couldn't be better. Oh, no, I'll go jump in the ocean behind me here in New Jersey. I see Bruce Springsteen. Anyway, everybody, it's always incredibly wonderful to be with you. We will be back again next week with more outrage and stuff that you couldn't make up. Wendy, thank you for your reports from Fascist Florida there, and everybody will keep at it. Hopefully, I'll have some good news from Wisconsin and other things that are going around. Mike Hurst, thanks for being with us. Steve Caruso, Myla, Wendy, thank you. Nancy, thank you. Naparco, thank you for your counseling services as well as helping us run the run the show. And we'll see you all next week. Okay.
Great job, Sluggo. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
See you next week. Thank you, guys. Thank you, John Steiner. Good to see you, and so many others. Dennis Bernstein. Wonderful. Okay, and Jerry.